I, 28F, have been married to my husband Mark, 32M, for 3 years. We met at a friend's birthday party 5 years ago when I had just started my job as a marketing manager. Mark worked in the same building as an architect, and we kept running into each other in the elevator. After a few casual conversations, we started dating and things got serious pretty quickly. Mark's family, especially his mom Sandra, 57F, seemed really nice at first. Sandra had raised Mark and his sister Amy, 29F, alone after her husband died in a car accident when Mark was just 12. She never remarried and devoted her life to her kids. Amy works as a nurse at the local hospital and still lives with Sandra. I noticed early on that Amy was very possessive of her brother and always tried to include herself in our plans, but I didn't think much of it then. Before we got married, Sandra was very involved in our wedding planning. She had opinions about everything from the venue to my dress, but I tried to be understanding since Mark was her only son. Amy was less enthusiastic and made several comments about how we were rushing into marriage. She kept bringing up Mark's ex-girlfriends at family dinners, especially his high school girlfriend Jenny, but Mark always shut down those conversations. Last month, Sandra invited us over for Sunday dinner, which was pretty normal since we usually went there twice a month. She made her special pot roast and everything seemed fine at first. After dinner, while we were having coffee in the living room, Sandra started talking about her diamond ring. It was her engagement ring that her husband had given her, and she always said it was her most precious possession. She had shown it to me before, but this time she went into detail about how Mark's dad had saved for months to buy it. Later that evening, Sandra went upstairs to her room to get some old photo albums she wanted to show us. Suddenly, we heard her screaming. We all rushed upstairs to find her frantically going through her jewelry box. She turned to me with this wild look in her eyes and said her ring was missing. She claimed she had put it back in the box after showing it to me earlier, and now it was gone. Before I could even process what was happening, she started accusing me of stealing it. She said I was the only one who had shown so much interest in the ring's history and must have taken it when she wasn't looking. I was completely shocked and tried to defend myself, but then Amy jumped in. She claimed she had seen me lingering around the stairs near Sandra's room earlier, which was absolutely false. I had spent the entire evening in the living room except for one bathroom break. What hurt the most was Mark's reaction. Instead of defending me, he just stood there looking confused between his mother and me. Sandra was getting more hysterical by the minute and demanded I empty my purse and pockets right there. I felt so humiliated but did it anyway to prove my innocence. They found nothing, but Sandra insisted I must have hidden it somewhere in the house or slipped it to someone else. The situation got even worse when Sandra threatened to call the police if I didn't confess and return the ring. I was in tears at this point, and that's when Mark finally spoke up, but not to defend me. Instead, he suggested that maybe I should just apologize to calm his mother down, even if I hadn't taken it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own husband was asking me to apologize for something I hadn't done. I left their house that night feeling completely betrayed. Mark followed me home in his car while I drove mine. At home, instead of supporting me, he said I should have handled the situation better and not gotten so defensive because it made me look guilty. He kept saying his mom was just upset about losing something precious and I should try to understand her reaction. I told him I wasn't going to apologize for something I didn't do, and if he couldn't stand up for me against false accusations, maybe we needed to rethink our entire relationship. The next few days were absolute hell. Sandra apparently spent no time trying to find her ring but plenty of time spreading the story to their entire family. My phone was flooded with messages from Mark's relatives calling me a thief and saying they always knew I wasn't good enough for the family. Mark's cousins whom I'd only met at our wedding were messaging me demanding I confess. Mark started sleeping in the guest room, saying I was being unreasonable by not just apologizing to make peace. His sister Amy, who has a big social media following because of her fitness videos, started posting vague messages about how some people show their true colors eventually and you can never trust outsiders in a family. Everyone knew who she was talking about. I haven't spoken to Sandra or Amy since that day. Mark keeps trying to convince me to apologize, saying family peace is more important than pride. But I absolutely refuse to admit to something I didn't do just to make his family happy. My own parents and sister think I should stand my ground because apologizing would just make me look guilty and they'd never let me live it down. The whole situation has created a huge rift in our marriage. Mark and I barely talk anymore, and when we do, it always ends in an argument about the ring. He keeps saying I'm choosing my pride over his family's happiness. I've even suggested we look for the ring together, but Sandra refuses to let me back in her house, saying she doesn't want me to steal anything else. I feel like I'm losing my marriage over something I didn't even do. Mark seems more concerned about keeping his mom happy than standing by his wife. I'm starting to wonder if this is what the rest of my life will be like, always being considered an outsider in his family, never being trusted, and having my husband choose them over me every time. Update 1: These past few weeks have been absolute torture. Mark moved back to Sandra's house after our latest fight, which was probably our worst one yet. It all started when Sandra messaged Mark saying she had concrete proof that I stole her ring. According to her, she suddenly remembered she had installed security cameras in her house last year after a break-in attempt in their neighborhood. She claimed she finally checked the footage and saw me going into her room that evening. I was completely shocked because I hadn't gone anywhere near her room except when we all rushed up after hearing her scream about the missing ring. When Mark came home that evening, he looked really upset and wouldn't even make eye contact. He said his mom had shown him footage of someone with my height and build entering her room during the time we were all supposedly in the living room. I demanded to see this footage myself. It seemed very convenient that this evidence suddenly appeared 3 weeks after the incident. But Sandra refused to show it to me directly. She only showed it to Mark, and when he asked for a copy to show me, she claimed she had already deleted it because looking at it was too painful and triggered her anxiety about the theft. This made absolutely no sense to me. What kind of person deletes evidence that could help them recover a precious stolen item? When I pointed this out to Mark, he got defensive and accused me of calling his mother a liar. That's when things really exploded between us. The argument got heated quickly. I asked him why he was so quick to believe I was capable of stealing from his family. He started bringing up random incidents from the past, like how I had once joked about Sandra's expensive taste in jewelry, twisting it to make it sound like I had always been jealous of her things. When I got upset about him distorting my words, he finally revealed something that left me completely stunned. Sandra had apparently been against our marriage from the start. According to Mark, before our wedding, Sandra had actually tried multiple times to set him up with his high school girlfriend Jenny. She would invite Jenny to family events without telling Mark, hoping they would reconnect. Sandra thought Jenny, whose father owned a successful construction company, came from a better family and would make a more suitable wife for her son. Mark had kept this from me for all these years. He admitted that Sandra had never really accepted me but said he thought she would come around eventually if I just tried harder to fit in with their family. When I thought back to all the times Sandra had made subtle comments about my family's middle-class background or my job in marketing, everything started making sense. The whole ring situation wasn't about the ring at all, it was just another attempt to drive a wedge between us. When I told Mark this theory, he completely lost it. He accused me of being paranoid and said I was just trying to deflect attention from the evidence his mother had shown him. He said I was trying to make myself the victim when his mother was the one who had lost something precious. The fight got so bad that he ended up packing a bag and leaving to stay with Sandra. Before leaving, he gave me an ultimatum: either I apologized to his mother and return the ring, or he would file for separation. I stood my ground and told him he should think very carefully about choosing his mother's obvious lies over our marriage vows. He just shook his head and walked out. Since then, things have gotten even worse. Amy has been posting more stuff online, now openly calling me a gold digger. She wrote a long post about how she always knew I was after their family's money, conveniently forgetting that I make more money than Mark does. Some of Mark's cousins even contacted my workplace, telling my boss that they shouldn't trust me because I was a thief. Thankfully, my boss has known me for years and didn't take their accusations seriously. My sister Rachel suggested hiring a private investigator to look into this supposed security footage, but I don't see the point since Sandra conveniently deleted it. I'm starting to realize that maybe losing this marriage wouldn't be such a bad thing. If my husband can trust such an obvious lie from his mother over his wife of 3 years, what does that say about our relationship? The hardest part is seeing how quickly everything fell apart. 3 weeks ago, we were talking about starting a family, and now Mark won't even speak to me directly, he just sends short texts asking if I'm ready to apologize. I still can't believe how easily he believed I could do something like this. My friends keep telling me I'm better off without a husband who won't stand up for me, but it's hard to accept that my marriage might end over a ring I never even touched. The worst part is knowing that even if the ring mysteriously shows up tomorrow, the damage to our marriage might be irreparable. How do you come back from your husband believing you're capable of theft? Update 2: A surprising twist happened last week that changed everything. I was having coffee with my friend Lisa, who works as a nurse, when she mentioned something that made me freeze. She had recently visited her grandmother at Golden Oaks Retirement Home and learned that Sandra had been causing problems there. It turned out that Mark's grandmother, Sandra's mother, lived in the same facility. Lisa said she overheard Sandra having a heated argument with the staff about items supposedly missing from her mother's room. She remembered it clearly because Sandra was making a huge scene in the lobby, threatening to sue the facility over their negligence in protecting residents' belongings. This caught my attention immediately. I started investigating and discovered something disturbing. Sandra had filed 3 separate complaints in the past month alone about missing items from her mother's room: an expensive watch, a significant amount of cash, and a pearl necklace that had been in their family for generations. Each time, she had accused different staff members, but investigations found no evidence of theft. The retirement home management had actually issued her a formal warning about making false accusations against their staff. They had documentation of all these incidents, which struck me as very similar to what she had done to me with the ring. What was even more suspicious was that Mark had no idea about any of this. Sandra had been telling him his grandmother was doing great and actively discouraging him from visiting her. She'd always had excuses: his grandmother was tired, she was at medical appointments, or she was having a bad day. Mark hadn't seen his grandmother in almost 4 months because of these excuses. After careful consideration, I decided to anonymously tip off Mark about the situation at Golden Oaks. He finally visited his grandmother and uncovered the truth. Sandra had been systematically taking her mother's jewelry and valuables, claiming she was safe keeping them at home. His grandmother was devastated when she found out, saying she had been missing several family heirlooms but thought she was just becoming forgetful. When Mark confronted Sandra about this pattern of missing items, she finally broke down. She admitted she had been secretly gambling online for over a year and had accumulated massive debts. She had sold most of her mother's jewelry, including her own diamond ring, to cover her losses. The whole theft accusation against me was a desperate attempt to cover her tracks when she thought people might start asking questions about the missing ring. She chose me as her scapegoat because she never wanted Mark to marry me in the first place. She thought accusing me would serve 2 purposes: covering up her theft and breaking up our marriage. Amy knew about the gambling problem all along but helped cover it up because Sandra had been paying off her credit card debt in exchange for her silence. Mark came to our house yesterday, completely destroyed. He couldn't stop apologizing for not believing me. He said he had moved out of Sandra's house and gotten his own apartment because he needed space to process everything. He found out that Amy had even helped Sandra set up online gambling accounts, and had been deleting her browser history to hide it from Mark. I listened to his apologies but told him I needed time to think. The fact that he so easily believed I could steal from his family and sided with them against me showed a fundamental lack of trust in our relationship. He's been constantly calling and texting, begging for another chance, but I've asked him to give me space to process everything. Sandra sent me a long text message apologizing for her accusations, trying to blame it all on her gambling addiction and depression after her husband's death. Amy deleted all her social media posts about me but hasn't had the courage to apologize directly. All those relatives who called me a thief have gone mysteriously quiet. I'm still trying to decide what to do about my marriage. On one hand, I love Mark and understand he was manipulated by his family. On the other hand, his complete lack of trust in me and failure to stand by my side when I needed him most showed me a side of him I'm not sure I can forget. Update 3: After a lot of thinking and several long conversations with my family, I finally filed for divorce. The decision wasn't easy, but I realized I couldn't stay in a marriage where trust had been broken so fundamentally. Mark made numerous attempts to reconcile, sent flowers to my workplace every week, wrote long emails apologizing, and he even suggested marriage counseling. But I couldn't get past how easily he had believed I was capable of stealing from his mother. Sandra's situation changed significantly after her gambling addiction came to light. She had to sell her house to repay what she had taken from Mark's grandmother and is now living with Amy in a small apartment. She joined Gamblers Anonymous and claims to be 6 months clean. Mark's grandmother moved in with her other daughter in Florida and is doing much better now. She actually reached out to me last month with a heartfelt apology, even though none of this was her fault. She said she felt terrible about what her daughter had done to my marriage. The divorce proceedings went smoother than expected. Mark didn't contest anything and agreed to all my terms, including selling our house and splitting the proceeds. I think his guilt over not believing me made him more agreeable. My lawyer said it was one of the easiest divorces she'd ever handled. Amy tried reaching out through a mutual friend first, then sent a long social media message apologizing for supporting her mother's lies and posting those horrible things about me. She claimed she was caught between protecting her mother and doing the right thing. I blocked her without responding. Some actions can't be undone with just an apology. My life has taken a completely different direction since then. I got promoted to senior marketing director, which required relocating to Chicago. The distance has been healing. My sister Rachel moved in with me temporarily to help with the transition, and having her around has made everything easier. Last week, I ran into Jenny, Mark's high school girlfriend, at a coffee shop in Chicago, where she was visiting for business. The conversation was eye-opening. Turns out Sandra had lied about trying to set them up too. Jenny had been happily married for 7 years with 3 kids, and had never been interested in reconnecting with Mark. She said she only attended those family events because Sandra had told her Mark specifically requested her presence, which was another lie. Mark sent one final email last week. He wrote about how therapy had helped him understand his unhealthy relationship with his mother and how deeply he regretted not trusting me. He said losing me was the biggest mistake of his life and he would always regret choosing his mother's lies over our marriage. I read the email but didn't respond. Some betrayals cut too deep to heal. I'm not dating yet, though my friends keep trying to set me up. I'm focusing on my new job and finally doing things I always wanted to do but somehow never made time for. I joined a hiking group and started taking photography classes. For the first time in months, I feel at peace with my decision. Sandra still sends occasional messages through different numbers since I blocked her original one. She's trying to make amends, claiming the gambling addiction made her do terrible things. I delete these messages without reading them. Amy has finally stopped trying to contact me after I threatened legal action for harassment. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Mark had believed me from the start, but I try not to dwell on it. This experience taught me that I deserve someone who will trust me unconditionally and stand by my side no matter what their family says. Sometimes walking away is better than trying to fix something that was broken by betrayal.